Chapter 12. Matthew the Apprentice. "Matthew, have you finished printing those newspapers?" Uncle Abraham asked. "Almost," Matthew replied. "Well, when you are done, I need you to deliver these sermons to Pastor Keller. He's waiting for them," continued Uncle Abraham. "Oh, and when you get back from delivering the sermons, you will need to make more ink." Matthew nodded his head to let his uncle know that he had heard his instructions. In 1755, Matthew was a printer's apprentice. He was originally from a small village 30 miles north of Philadelphia. Matthew's father was a cooper there. A cooper is a skilled craftsman who knows how to make casts, buckets, barrels, and containers of all shapes and sizes. In the colonies, almost every kind of food and drink was stored in these kinds of containers his father made. When Matthew was little, he had thought that he would one day work with his father. However, his older brother Jonah had become their father's apprentice. From the age of 7 until he was 10, Matthew had attended a one-room schoolhouse where he was fortunate enough to have been taught how to read and write. 4 days after his 11th birthday, Matthew's uncle Abraham had come to visit. During his visit, he had offered Matthew the opportunity to move to Philadelphia and become his apprentice. At first, Matthew had not wanted to leave his family. He had 3 younger sisters he loved dearly, along with his brother Jonah. However, Matthew's parents had explained to him that he would have to learn a skill so that when he grew up, he too could support a family. Before Uncle Abraham left, Matthew had signed an apprenticeship agreement that stated that he would faithfully serve his uncle, keep his secrets, and obey all his lawful commands. For his part, Uncle Abraham had agreed to spend 7 years teaching him the skill he needed to be a successful printer. During that time, he would house, feed, and clothe Matthew. 4 weeks after his uncle's visit, Matthew's father had loaded up their wagon, and they had set off for Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, Matthew and his father had spent 2 days exploring the city with Uncle Abraham. Then on the 3rd day, his father had bought supplies for his workshop and said goodbye. Matthew had watched his father go until he was out of sight. Though his eyes filled with tears, Matthew willed them not to fall. 4 years had passed since that day. Now Matthew was 15 years old. Matthew had 3 more years to serve as an apprentice. When his 7 years of training were finished, Matthew would become a journeyman. A journeyman was a skilled printer, though not yet a master craftsman. Matthew would spend 3 more years working alongside his uncle, and he would receive payment for his work. Then when he turned 21 years of age, Matthew hoped to become a master craftsman and open up his own business. Matthew finished printing the last newspaper. Printing newspapers was one of the hardest jobs of all. It could take more than 20 hours to print one page. All of the work was done by hand. This included organizing tiny pieces of metal with individual letters or punctuation marks on them in the order in which they had to appear on the printed page. This task was called setting the type. The type was then held firmly in place as an inking pad spread ink over the type. The printing press transferred the carefully arranged words and sentences onto paper. Matthew picked up the bundle of printed sermons and quickly checked to see if he had all of the ingredients needed to make the ink when he returned. Ink was made from tannin, iron sulfate, gum, and water. He was happy to see that Uncle Abraham had stocked up on these supplies. Out on the street, Matthew made his way towards the small wooden church at the end of the avenue. Pastor Keller was the Lutheran minister in charge of this church. As Matthew walked, a small shaggy brown dog came to keep him company. The dog had appeared several times earlier in the week near the door to their kitchen. Matthew had thrown it some scraps, and now it appeared whenever Matthew did. "Hey, you want to come with me?" Matthew asked as he clicked his fingers. The small dog looked up at Matthew and wagged his tail. "Okay then," said Matthew. "Let's go." Matthew began to run down the avenue, taking care to hold on tight to his delivery. The small white dog scampered happily after him. Do you think being a printer's apprentice is a good opportunity for Matthew?